Hey guys, tonight we're traveling deep into the humid heart of the ancient Maya world. And yes, it's going to be sticky, buggy, and absolutely fascinating. You're about to wake up in a forest where the air feels like warm soup, parrots scream overhead like gossiping neighbors, and the ground smells like wet earth and sweet fruit. It's early morning in the Yucatan Peninsula, centuries before chocolate bars or coffee cups existed. But you somehow are here, about to meet the original makers of what would one day become everyone's favorite comfort drink. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Are you in your midnight zone or sneaking this in during your lunch break? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up lying on a woven mat inside a palm leaf hut. The air hums with insects, and a faint mist curls through the cracks of the walls. Outside, someone is calling your name, though it's not your name, not really. It's your new name, given to you by the cacao gatherers, and today is your first morning among them. You stretch, feeling the humidity cling to your skin like a second layer of clothing. You step outside barefoot. The ground squishes under your feet, still damp from last night's rain. Smoke rises from small cooking fires, and the smell of roasted maize drifts through the air. Chickens cluck lazily between the huts. In the distance, a rooster lets out a heroic but slightly tired crow. An older woman hands you a clay cup of something warm, not chocolate yet, but a corn drink called atoll. It's thick, mild, and earthy. You sip it and try not to grimace. She laughs, patting your arm like you'll get used to it. You notice the people around you are already preparing for the day's work. Baskets, wooden tools, and woven cloth ready to go. Everyone's moving with calm precision, like they've done this 1,000 times. Today's job is to head into the forest to check on the cacao groves. These aren't farms like you might picture. No neat rows, no fences. The trees grow in the shade of the towering jungle canopy, hidden between vines and ferns. It's like nature's own secret garden, and the Maya treat it that way. Sacred, alive, and slightly unpredictable. As you walk, a guide named Chan explains that these trees were, according to legend, gifts from the gods. The cacao came from the underworld, he says, brought up by the god Kukulkan so humans could have wisdom and strength. You nod, trying to look serious, though inside you're thinking. So basically, chocolate was the first energy drink. The jungle is loud. Cicadas buzz like 1,000 tiny rattles. Monkeys bark somewhere in the canopy, and tropical birds flash blue and red like falling jewels. You duck under a massive leaf that could double as an umbrella. Sweat drips down your temples. It's not even noon yet. You reach a small clearing where the cacao trees stand, short, with glossy green leaves and brightly colored pods hanging from the trunks. They're beautiful, strange, and slightly alien-looking. The pods grow straight out of the bark, like nature forgot about normal rules. Some are yellow, some red, some green streaked with purple. John picks one carefully and hands it to you. Each one is a blessing, he says. You hold it in your palm. It's heavier than you expect, warm from the sun, smooth but bumpy. Inside are the beans that will one day become chocolate. But right now, it's just a mystery. He slices the pod open with a stone knife, revealing a cluster of white, glossy beans wrapped in a slimy pulp that smells sweet and sour at once. You lean closer, fascinated. It looks, well, not appetizing. Chan laughs again. Don't worry, he says, it doesn't look like chocolate yet. You pop one bean into your mouth anyway, because curiosity wins. It's tart, fruity, and a little weird. More like lychee than cocoa. You pretend to like it. Chan raises an eyebrow, but says nothing. The sun breaks through the canopy, painting the leaves gold. You hear the soft rustle, more gatherers arriving, carrying baskets, humming low songs to keep time as they work. The sound mixes with the wind and the jungle's rhythm. You feel oddly peaceful, even as sweat trickles down your back. Later, when you pause to rest, Chan tells you that cacao trees need both shade and rain. Too much sun, and they die too little, and the beans don't grow right. The Maya believe this balance mirrors human life. We need darkness and light, he says. To make something truly good, it sounds poetic, and maybe a little philosophical for someone knee-deep in mud, but it sticks with you. You lean against a tree, look at the pods glowing like lanterns in the green gloom, and realize this is where it all began. Not in a fancy European cafe, not in a modern kitchen, but here, in the buzzing heart of the jungle, where chocolate was still a secret whispered between humans and gods. And somewhere, centuries from now, someone will bite into a candy bar and have no idea they're tasting a story that started with you, standing here, barefoot, holding a fruit that doesn't even look like chocolate yet. The next morning, you wake to the sound of rain, not a drizzle, but the kind that feels like the sky just tipped over a giant bucket. The thatched roof above you leaks in tiny, predictable spots, and every few seconds, a drop lands perfectly on your forehead. You give up on sleep and crawl out from under your woven blanket. Outside, the whole world is silver and green. Wrapped in mist, the villagers are already awake, laughing at the weather like it's an old friend who shows up uninvited, but always brings good news. For the Maya, rain is everything. It means life, growth, and, most importantly, cacao. You grab a gourd bowl of breakfast porridge, maize, honey, and a sprinkle of chili powder that you weren't emotionally prepared for, and follow the sound of voices toward the forest edge. Today, you're not harvesting, you're nurturing. Chand, your guide from yesterday, waves you over with a grin. Now we make sure the gods are happy, he says, which, honestly, sounds like a pretty big responsibility before you've finished your coffee. Except, there is no coffee. The Maya haven't invented it yet. All you've got is a thin, warm cacao drink that tastes faintly of smoke and bitterness. It's an acquired taste. He hands you a clay jar filled with the same drink. We offer this to the trees, he says solemnly. You look at the jar, then the trees, then back at him. Wait, we're giving chocolate to the chocolate trees. You whisper. John shrugs. It's balance. Life feeds life. You nod, pretending you totally get it, though deep down you're thinking, okay, that's like feeding a chicken an omelet. The ceremony begins. A few elders gather around the tallest cacao tree, one so old its bark is covered in moss. They chant softly in Yucatec Maya, rhythmic, slow words that sound like the forest's own heartbeat. Someone sprinkles cacao drink on the roots, another ties bits of bright cloth to a branch. You notice how quiet everything becomes. Even the rain seems to soften, as if listening. It's in this moment that Chan leans over and tells you something you'll never forget. Cacao, he says, is not just food. It is the blood of the gods, the heart of the earth, and as dramatic as that sounds, it clicks. These people don't just grow crops. They grow relationships with the spirits they believe live inside them. The Maya didn't have money like we do today. Instead, cacao beans themselves were money. You could buy a turkey with 100 beans, or a slave with 10 times that. There's even a rumor, though historians still argue about this, that counterfeit beans existed. Little clay fakes painted brown to fool the unwary. Imagine being the ancient world's first victim of chocolate-based fraud. By midday, the rain eases, and sunlight spills through the dripping leaves. The villagers gather around fires to dry off, chatting and grinding fresh cacao beans on stone slabs called matates. The smell that rises is intoxicating, earthy, bitter, rich. You can almost taste the history in the air. You kneel beside one of the women, Cacao, who's grinding with smooth, practiced movements. The sound of the stone against stone is rhythmic, soothing. It takes strength, she says, not looking up, but it also takes patience. The beans must feel your intention. You try a few passes yourself and quickly realize your arms were not designed for ancient manual labor. Cacao laughs, kindly, but also a little smugly. When the paste is ready, they mix it with water, chili, and a hint of honey. No milk, no sugar, no foam hearts on top. This is chocolate in its rust, oldest form. A sacred, spicy, slightly bitter drink that was never meant to be sweet. You take a sip, it's intense. It burns a little on your tongue, wakes you up in a way modern caffeine never could. You feel alert, grounded, connected, maybe even blessed. Or maybe that's just the chili. As the day winds down, the villagers gather under a large shelter. Children chase each other, dogs nap by the fire, and someone begins to play a wooden flute. The tune rises and falls like the wind through leaves. It feels peaceful. You watch the cacao beans drying by the fire, dark and fragrant, and you think, this is where luxury really began. Not in palaces, but in small hands, under rain-soaked roofs, turning beans into something divine. Later, as the stars prick the sky one by one, Chan tells you that every drop of rain that touched the earth today was a blessing from Chak, the rain god. Without him, he says, the cacao trees sleep. You look up at the constellations shimmering like spilled sugar over the jungle and wonder how many nights like this the Maya spent thanking the sky for chocolate. You fall asleep to the sound of frogs and soft drumming, your head full of the day's scents, smoke, earth, spice, and a strange comfort in knowing that somewhere in this world, thousands of years later, people will still chase this same flavor, still whisper the same reverence for something as simple and as sacred as cacao. The morning air smells of damp leaves and roasted cacao, a combination that somehow feels ancient, like it's been repeating for 1,000 years. You step outside and stretch beneath a pinkish dawn sky. Today, John tells you, is the day you'll finally harvest the cacao pods. You glance at the trees around you, tall, dark, and covered in those strange football-shaped fruits that cling directly to the trunks, like nature forgot how branches work. You walk closer, the pods glow in muted oranges, reds, and yellows, as if someone painted the forest with melted sunset. Chun grins. Each color means something, he says. Green, not ready, red, too late, orange. Perfect, you nod wisely, pretending to understand the fine line between perfect cacao and forest disappointment. He hands you a wooden knife with a curved blade. Careful, he warns, never pull them off the tree. You might hurt the spirit inside. You blink. The spirit, he nods, utterly serious. Each cacao tree as one. Angry trees give bitter beans. You take that to heart. No one wants to be responsible for bad chocolate karma. So you start cutting carefully, one pod at a time, cradling each like it's a newborn. The sound of pods dropping softly into the wicker baskets fills the air. The jungle hums, insects, parrots, the low croak of frogs, all blending into the background like 1,000 tiny percussionists. Sweat trickles down your neck, but there's a strange rhythm to the work, a calm that sneaks in as you repeat the same movements again and again. When your basket's half full, you take a break under the shade of a ceiba tree. Chan joins you, plops down, and takes a long sip of cacao drink. Do you know, he says between breaths, the gods made humans from maize, but they gave us cacao to remember divinity. You raise an eyebrow. So chocolate is like holy snack food. He chuckles. Exactly. Here's where it gets fascinating, and just a little weird. Archaeologists found ancient Maya pottery with cacao residue dating back over 3,000 years. That's older than Rome, older than the Great Wall, older than your sense of responsibility. And even more interesting, some historians argue that the Maya might have first fermented cacao pulp into beer before they ever thought of drinking it as chocolate. Imagine chocolate beer parties in 1000 BC. History might have been more fun than we think. By midday, you've gathered what feels like a small mountain of pods. The villagers haul them to an open clearing, where the real magic begins. Chun cracks open a pod with a practiced twist, pop, and inside you see rows of pale, slimy beans glistening in the sunlight. They look nothing like chocolate, more like alien eggs, if you're being honest. You hesitate. This becomes chocolate. He grins, teeth bright. Eventually, each bean is wrapped in a layer of sweet, white pulp. The villagers scoop them out by hand, laughing and licking their fingers. Apparently, it tastes like mango, and Pear had a secret child. You try it. He's right. It's sweet, tangy, and refreshing, a completely different flavor from what it will become later. You realize chocolate doesn't start out tasting like chocolate. It earns the taste through fire, time, and patience. The beans are poured into woven baskets covered with banana leaves and left to ferment under the sun. The air fills with a strange, fruity aroma that changes hour by hour, from fresh and tropical to something deeper, muskier. The gods breathe into it. An elder tells you that's what gives it spirit. Science, of course, would say it's the yeast and bacteria working their microbial magic. But even modern biologists can't help admitting there's something poetic about calling fermentation divine breath. Historians still debate how the Maya first discovered this process. Maybe it was an accident, a forgotten pod left too long in the sun that turned out surprisingly delicious. Or maybe it was deliberate experimentation. Either way, humanity's relationship with cacao began the same way it always does: curiosity and a hint of hunger. As the sun dips low, the clearing glows golden. The villagers pile the pod's empty shells into a heap, setting them ablaze as an offering. Smoke curls upward, carrying that bittersweet scent into the darkening sky. You stand beside Chand, your hands sticky with pulp, your clothes streaked with red and brown stains. He looks at you and says, "Now the beans sleep, and when they wake, they will be something else entirely." You think about that, how transformation takes time, warmth, and a little mystery. Maybe humans aren't so different from cacao beans. Maybe we, too, need to ferment a while before we turn into something truly sweet. The frogs start their evening chorus. Fireflies blink among the trees like embers refusing to die. You take one last look at the sleeping baskets of beans wrapped in their banana leaf blankets and whisper goodnight. Tomorrow, the jungle will wake to the smell of roasting. You wake up to smoke, not the choking kind, the rich, earthy scent of roasting cacao. The entire village smells like a warm bakery built in the middle of a rainforest. Your stomach growls immediately, though Chan reminds you, you won't eat yet. First, we wake the beans. You follow him to the open clearing, where the baskets from yesterday now sit uncovered. The beans, once pale and sticky, are now deep brown and slightly shriveled, transform overnight like they'd been dreaming their way into flavor. You crouch down to look closer. They glisten faintly in the morning sun, almost alive. The villagers pour the fermented beans into wide clay pans set over slow fires. The wood smoke curls around your face, heavy with the scent of earth, spice, and something faintly floral. As the beans roast, they begin to crackle softly, like whispers from the past. John grins. That's them talking. You stir them carefully with a long wooden paddle. The heat is intense, the kind that clings to your skin. Each motion feels deliberate, the same way it's been done for over 1,000 years. A few of the beans pop, releasing tiny bursts of aroma. You catch hints of toasted nuts and bread. You also catch a bit of ash in your hair, but you decide that's part of the experience. Here's a fun historical tidbit. Maya roasting pans weren't made of metal, obviously. They used clay griddles called comales, the same ones used to cook tortillas. So yes, your future chocolate and your breakfast tacos technically share ancestors. That's culinary destiny at work. When the roasting's done, the beans are poured into a carved wooden trough to cool. They're darker now, rich and shiny, and they smell like something between coffee and magic. One of the women, her hand steady from years of practice, begins to crack the shells by rolling them under a flat stone. The beans break open with a satisfying crunch, revealing the dark nibs inside. You can't help but reach out and pop one into your mouth. It's bitter, like really bitter. You make a face. Chan laughs so hard he nearly drops his paddle. No sweetness yet, he says. You taste the earth, the rain, the fire, but not the sugar. Sugar hasn't even been invented here. You nod thoughtfully, pretending you're savoring the complex profile, when in reality you're plotting revenge on the concept of bitterness. Then comes the grinding. Two women kneel on smooth stone slabs called matates, each with a curved stone roller called a mano. They start pushing the nibs back and forth, and you realize this is an upper body workout that could humble any modern gym enthusiast. Slowly, the nibs begin to melt under pressure, releasing all and turning into a thick, glossy paste. The sound of grinding fills the air, steady, rhythmic, hypnotic. You watch as the paste gathers on the stone, dark and gleaming, the first true form of chocolate. But it's still unsweetened, strong, almost savage in flavor. This is the chocolate of warriors and priests, not bedtime snacks. Historically, this process was sacred. Only certain people, often women, could prepare cacao for rituals or ceremonies. Some glyphs even show goddesses grinding beans, their hair braided with jade, their faces calm. To the Maya, this wasn't cooking, it was communion. Chan dips a finger into the warm paste and marks a small symbol on your forehead, a swirl, like a spiral shell. Now you're part of it. he says softly. You're not entirely sure what it is, but you feel strangely honored. The paste on your skin smells faintly of smoke and fruit, of something older than language. As the afternoon heat builds, the cacao paste is transferred into ceramic bowls. A little chili is added. Yes, chili. Chan crushed the red pods with a stone and mixes them in. To awaken the blood, he explains, you take a sniff. It's spicy enough to wake the ancestors. Here's a twist that still fascinates historians. Maya chocolate was never meant to be sweet. It was a ceremonial drink, thick and frothy, often mixed with chili, honey, or maize flour. It wasn't dessert. It was power in liquid form. Some anthropologists think warriors drank it before battle, while priests offered it to the gods during sacred rites. And speaking of gods, the Maya believe cacao was a direct gift from Kukulkan, the feathered serpent deity. They even had a cacao god, Cacao, who was basically the divine patron of traders and chocolate makers. Imagine having a god whose sole job is to bless your cocoa business. Talk about sweet devotion. By sunset, you're drenched in sweat, your hands covered in traces of brown paste and ash. But you've helped turn fruit into something transcendent. The villagers gather around, sharing bowls of warm, spiced cacao. The taste hits you like a revelation, bitter at first, then smoky, then strangely comforting. You lean back, watching the last light fade through the canopy. The jungle hums softly, as if satisfied with your progress. You don't just taste history tonight, you're part of it, sipping from the same vessel as kings, priests, and farmers who believed that in every cup of cacao the gods themselves were whispering. You close your eyes, the warmth of the drink still on your tongue, and wonder what it would feel like to live in a world where even bitterness was sacred. By the time the stars emerge over the jungle, your arms ache from grinding, and your hands still smell faintly of roasted cacao and smoke. You think that's the end of it. Surely the drink you had earlier was the final stage, but Sean grins, holding up a painted bowl like a magician, about to reveal the next trick. No, he says, now we make it dance. You follow him back to the longhouse, where the villagers are sitting around low fires. The air feels thick, filled with the sweet spicy aroma of chocolate mixed with something musky. Maybe flowers, maybe incense, maybe both. Clay jars and bowls are everywhere. Chan hands you one filled with the warm cacao paste you helped grind. This, he says proudly, is what the gods drink. But apparently the gods don't like their drinks flat. The Maya preferred their chocolate with foam, and not just a little froth. They wanted a mountain of bubbles on top, shimmering like gold dust. Foam was a status symbol, the mark of refinement. The higher your foam, the closer you were to the divine. How do you get foam without a blender? With style, a woman stands up, holding two long-handled vessels. She pours the liquid cacao back and forth between them, from shoulder height, then waist level, then shoulder again, without spilling a drop. The stream glows under the firelight, forming tiny bubbles as it falls. It looks like a dark waterfall, smooth and rhythmic, a little performance of balance and patience. You try it. Spoiler, you're terrible at it. The first pour splashes down your tunic. The second nearly hits the dog. The woman laughs gently, her bracelets jingling. You must let the cacao breathe, she says. You pour too hard. So you try again, slower this time. And finally, a thin layer of foam begins to form, trembling like bronze in the firelight. Fun fact, archaeologists actually found ancient Maya drinking vessels with inscriptions that say things like the cacao drink a so-and-so, noble of this place. Imagine labeling your cup like, this mug belongs to Duke Carlos, Supreme Lord of Morning Chocolate. It's the world's earliest personalized coffee cup. The drink is finally ready. Thick, dark, foamy, spiced with chili and sometimes a dash of honey or maize. You sip carefully. It's warm and bitter, but the chili hits your throat like a spark, and suddenly you feel very awake. Chun grins again. Now you see why warriors drank it before battle, he says, and indeed, some historians believe cacao acted as a mild stimulant. Thanks to compounds like theobromine and caffeine. It wasn't just for pleasure, it was for energy, focus, even ritual strength. The Maya didn't drink chocolate. They summoned it. As you drink, you notice the room growing quieter. The older men are murmuring prayers to Cacao, the cacao god. They offer a few drops of the drink onto the ground, letting it soak into the soil, a gift back to the earth that bore the trees. The children watch in silence the way you might watch fireworks or shooting stars. You glance around and catch the faint shimmer of gold in the firelight, gold dust mixed into some of the bowls, reflecting off painted glyphs of serpents, flowers, and cacao pods. Every cup tells a story. Every sip feels like a ritual, a curious thing. Some scholars debate whether this form of foaming and pouring had spiritual meaning, or if it was just for texture. Was the foam a symbol of divine breath, or was it simply delicious vanity? No one's sure. Historians still argue over it, because when it comes to chocolate, even academics can get emotional. Chan leans over, his voice soft. They say the foam carries the spirit of the drink. It rises to the top like the soul rising from the body. You swirl your bowl gently, watching the bubbles shimmer and fade. There's something hauntingly poetic about that. The idea that every cup of chocolate is a tiny metaphor for life outside. The jungle hums louder, insects forming a steady rhythm like distant drummers. The stars overhead feel impossibly close. Someone starts playing a wooden flute, a slow melody that drifts between the palm roofs. The night is heavy with the smell of cacao, smoke, and warmth. You realize this isn't just about making a drink. It's about connection, with the earth, with the gods, with each other. Even the act of pouring becomes a kind of communication, an ancient language of gesture and sound. And then, as you sit there, bowl in hand, skin glowing in the firelight, you understand something. The Maya weren't just making chocolate. They were crafting experience. Every sense was involved. Sight, sound, touch, taste, even breath. You weren't supposed to just consume it. You were meant to be present for it. You take one last sip. The foam leaves a faint mustache across your upper lip. Chan bursts into laughter again. "Nah," he says, "you look like a priest." You grin, not entirely sure if that's a compliment. But it doesn't matter, because somewhere between the first pour and the last sip, you stopped being a visitor. For a moment, you were part of their world, standing in the glow of fire and faith, listening to the heartbeat of the jungle, tasting history that's still alive. By the time the sun rises again, you're starting to understand why the Maya treated cacao like sacred treasure. But today, you'll see how literal that word treasure really is, because now it's time to talk about cacao as currency. Yes, you heard that right. You're about to spend chocolate like cash. Morning mist curls over the trees, and the village slowly stirs awake. You're sitting with Chan near a small market square. Though square might be a generous term, it's more like a clearing shaded by palm trees, filled with stalls made of reed mats and wooden poles. Women spread colorful cloths on the ground and lay out what looks like a tiny civilization of objects: corn, fish, clay pots, feathers, obsidian blades, and little brown seeds, cacao beans. At first, you don't notice them. They're so small, just a handful of reddish-brown ovals. But soon you realize they're everywhere, tied in strings, stored in baskets, exchanged between hands with all the seriousness of gold coins. "Here," Chan says, handing you a pouch. It jingles softly like money, but instead of coins, it's filled with dried cacao beans. 10 beans, he says, can buy you a rabbit. 100 can buy you a slave. You blink. A slave, he nods solemnly, or a very fine cloak. You feel a chill despite the warm morning air. Chocolate, it turns out, could buy a human life. Historians actually confirm this through colonial records. Cacao was not only sacred but monetized. It served as both food and finance, the edible corn of an empire. You wander through the market, pouch in hand, and the world starts to shift. A woman offers you a bunch of ripe tomatoes, 2 cacao beans. A fisherman grins, waving a smoked fish, 5 beans. A little boy runs by shouting prices like a medieval auctioneer. It's bizarre and brilliant all at once. The beans are light, fragrant, and slightly oily from age. You wonder how anyone stops themselves from eating their money. Spoiler, they didn't always. There are records of counterfeit cacao beans, hollow shells filled with dirt or wax. The first chocolate fraudsters. A cool breeze sweeps through, and a few beans tumble from your pouch, scattering across the dusty ground. Instinctively, 3 children dive for them. You laugh, embarrassed, and yet the energy feels oddly familiar, like you just dropped a handful of coins in a busy street. But as the day goes on, Chan takes you deeper into the trading culture. He explains that cacao's value wasn't just economic, it was symbolic. Offering someone a few beans was a gesture of respect, a kind of blessing, the very act of giving chocolate, even before it became a sweet treat, carried emotional weight. And here's where it gets even more fascinating. Some scholars argue that cacao wasn't only money, but also a measure of morality. If you hoarded too much, you were greedy. If you gave generously, you were noble. It's like if your bank balance reflected your soul. Honestly, that might make tax season a lot more awkward. Under the palm trees, you watch traders laugh and argue, count and exchange, all with those tiny brown seeds. The rhythm of the market feels almost musical. The click of clay bowls, the chatter of women, the flutter of woven fans. Everything revolves around cacao. You pause to sip a fresh drink from a vendor. Chocolate again, but this one's cold, mixed with maize and honey. The flavor is earthy, complex, almost grounding. It's easy to forget this same liquid once fueled gods, kings, and warriors. Now it's a casual refreshment, sold to anyone with a few beans to spare. Doesn't it ever run out, you ask? What if the trees stopped growing? Chan looks up toward the hills, where the forest stretches endlessly. If the gods are pleased, he says, the trees will always give. There's a tone in his voice that makes you think this isn't just an old saying. It's faith disguised as economics, the idea that prosperity depends on divine harmony. If people misused the beans or grew greedy, maybe the trees would stop bearing fruit. You find that oddly comforting and slightly terrifying. It's like the entire financial system depends on cosmic goodwill. Imagine your credit score depending on how often you pray. As the sun climbs high, the market begins to close. People pack their goods, count their beans, and offer thanks to the gods. You watch an elderly man gently sprinkle a few cacao beans onto the ground before leaving. For balance, Chan says softly, to remind the earth who feeds us. Somewhere deep inside, you feel a strange connection between that act and your own world. The invisible systems of value we live by, the things we trust to mean something. Cacao beans were fragile, perishable, and small, yet entire economies rested on them. Maybe every civilization builds its world on something that could technically melt away as the last light hits the treetops. Turning them bronze, you pocket a single cacao bean, not as money, but as memory. The smell lingers on your fingers, earthy, sweet, ancient. And just before you leave, Chan says one more thing, half joking, half serious. Be careful, traveler. Once you carry cacao, it carries you too. You don't quite understand what he means, but as the market's sounds fade into the jungle, you have the odd feeling he might be right. The next morning, you wake to a softer light filtering through the dense canopy. Dew clings to the leaves like tiny crystals, and the air smells like wet earth and promise. Today, Chan tells you, you'll learn the secret of grinding and mixing cacao, the alchemy that transforms bitter beans into a drink that could command gods and kings. You follow him to the longhouse, where several women are already seated at low stone slabs. Their hands are posed over matates, the ancient grinding stones. The rhythmic motion of mano against slab fills the room, a steady, hypnotic sound that vibrates through your bones. You can feel the anticipation of the cacao itself, as if the beans understand they're about to change forever. Chan hands you a handful of roasted nibs. They are warm and slightly oily, glinting like tiny shards of dark amber. You place them on the stone and start pushing with the smooth curve of the roller. Immediately, your arms burn, but there's a strange satisfaction in the resistance. Every push releases the faint scent of chocolate, smoky, bitter, alive. Historically, grinding cacao by hand was considered an art form. The smoothness of the final paste indicated skill, patience, and devotion. Some glyphs depict priests grinding cacao with meticulous care, almost like a religious ceremony. You feel their presence watching over your clumsy motions. A curious, little-known fact. The Maya sometimes added roasted maize or chili directly into the grinding mixture, long before sweeteners existed. The combination wasn't for dessert. It was a functional beverage, a ritual stimulant, even a form of nutrition. You lick a smudge from your finger. The taste is fiery, slightly earthy, and unforgettable. As you continue, the paste begins to darken and thicken, your muscles ache, but you notice the texture changing, the oils from the nibs releasing, binding the particles together. You pause, running your fingers over the glossy surface. It's smooth, almost liquid in the way light plays across it, but dense and rich. This, you realize, is the magic moment. Cacao's transformation from raw bean to sacred paste. Chan steps closer, offering a small scoop. Add a little water, he says. You pour a thin stream, and the paste resists at first, then reluctantly melts into a thick liquid. Steam rises, carrying the scent of fire, earth, and chocolate. You sip cautiously. Bitter at first, then complex. Hints of smoke, spice, and the subtle sweetness of maize. Your tongue tingles. Another layer of history unfolds. Maya nobles often drank this mixture during ceremonies, but commoners, too, would have it at celebrations. The texture and preparation could signify rank. The finer the grind, the higher the status. Grinding wasn't just practical. It was a social statement, a demonstration of care and mastery. You notice the women moving with seamless coordination, their hands trained from years of practice. Every motion is fluid, purposeful, almost choreographed. One of them sprinkles in a pinch of chili, another folds in maize flour. The resulting aroma fills the space, heavy and intoxicating. You realize that in this moment, the room is alive with generations of knowledge, ritual, and subtle artistry. Chan leans over your shoulder. Every fold, every rotation tells a story. He says the beans remember who handled them. You can't decide whether he's joking or serious, but the weight of the moment makes you think he might be right. Here's a disputed point that scholars still debate. Some argue that the Maya's grinding techniques were purely functional, while others insist there was a spiritual element. The act itself could honor the gods. Either way, the ritual adds depth to the taste, even if you don't consciously notice it. By mid-morning, the paste is fully formed, dense and glossy, ready for the final ceremonial touches. Chan motions toward a low bench where small jars of honey and chili sit. These are optional, he says, but tradition favors experimentation. Flavor is prayer. You hesitate, then cautiously add a tiny pinch of chili. The aroma bursts instantly, and the thick chocolate hums with life. You take another sip. This time, it's richer, layered, alive, a bitter, spicy, soulful liquid that somehow tastes like the forest itself. Outside, the birds chatter, leaves shimmer, and a soft wind carries the jungle's fragrance into the longhouse. You pause, letting the taste linger. It's strange, almost meditative, how making chocolate can be both exhausting and calming, physical and spiritual. You glance at Chan, who smiles knowingly. Every cup, he murmurs, is a conversation between the earth, the beans, and the hands that shape them. You lean back, arms sore but satisfy, and realize this isn't just a drink. It's history, ritual, art, and nourishment. All intertwined, every grind, every stir, every pinch of spice connects you to a civilization that revered cacao as both sustenance and sacred gift. By mid-afternoon, the air has warmed, and the jungle hums with cicadas, birds, and distant howls. Today, Chan wants you to learn how the Maya flavored their chocolate. And this is where things get unexpectedly bold. You might think chocolate is just cocoa and sugar, but here, sugar isn't even part of the story yet. Instead, flavor comes from fire, spice, and imagination. You follow him to a shaded area near the river, where a low table holds clay jars, dried flowers, chili pods, maize kernels, and honey. The array looks like a miniature jungle of its own, all carefully sorted and labeled in colorful glyphs. Every addition tells a story, Chan says, some for warmth, some for alertness, some for ceremony. You pick up a chili pod. Its surface is wrinkled a dark brick red and smells faintly of earth. You hesitate. A tiny seed escapes into your hand, and you realize the spice is concentrated, potent. A little goes a long way. Chan warns, chocolate is humble, but it can burn if you're careless. Here's something interesting. The Maya often added maize to cacao, not just for taste, but for texture and nourishment. The ground maize gives body to the drink, creating a thicker, richer texture that lingers on your lips. You mix some in, stirring slowly with a wooden paddle. The paste resists at first, then slowly blends, forming a dark, earthy brown slurry. You taste a bit. Smooth, slightly grainy, and satisfying in an unexpected way. Chan moves over to a small jar of honey, its amber surface glinting in the dappled sunlight. He drizzles a small amount into his cup. The sweetness isn't overwhelming. It balances the bitterness and the heat of the chili. You notice how each sip feels like a journey. Bitter first, spicy next, then finally the gentle warmth of sweetness that smooths everything together. An odd little-known fact. The Maya sometimes added flowers or tree bark to chocolate for subtle aromatics. Imagine sipping your morning chocolate with hints of marigold or cinnamon bark. It has a flavor experience that modern palates might find strange. Yet it was highly prized in ritual settings. You sprinkle a few petals into your own cup, fascinated by how scent changes taste. As you sip, John leans in, lowering his voice. Some flavors are for the gods, some are for humans, some are for both, he says. You nod, feeling the wisdom in this seemingly simple act. Every choice and preparation is intentional, measured, and meaningful. Historians debate whether all these additions were symbolic or simply culinary experimentation. Did flowers honor deities, or were they early experiments in gastronomy? The evidence is patchy, and interpretations vary, so even academics argue over whether ritual or taste dominated. You try stirring again, adding a pinch of roasted maize flour to thicken it further. The chocolate clings to the paddle and drips slowly, its aroma filling the shaded space. You inhale deeply, and the complex mixture, bitter, earthy, spicy, sweet, feels like the forest distilled into liquid. Nearby, villagers are preparing their own variations, chatting softly while their hands move in practiced, precise motions. You realize that making chocolate is as much about community as it is about taste. Everyone adds something personal, a spice, a technique, a ritual motion. Yet the final drink belongs to the group, to the moment, to the forest. Chan hands you a small bowl, urging you to try pouring it from one container to another. The motion helps blend the ingredients and, surprisingly, begins creating a thin layer of foam on top. It's subtle but satisfying, like watching tiny waves ripple across a chocolate river. The foam isn't just aesthetic, it's a sign of mastery, patience, and care. By the time you finish, the sun is low, casting long shadows across the clearing. You sip your final cup, savoring the mingling flavors and the way your hands still smell faintly of cacao, spice, and earth. There's something meditative about it, as if each sip is a small bridge to another time, another culture, another way of understanding the world. Chan sits quietly beside you, watching the river. Chocolate carries memory, he says softly, not just of the beans, but of the hands that shaped it, the earth that nourished it, and the people who shared it. You nod, feeling the weight of that truth. And as you take your last sip before nightfall, you realize that the act of flavoring chocolate is more than culinary. It's a conversation, a ritual, a story in liquid form, and you're now part of that story. Evening settles over the village, and the jungle takes on a soft, golden glow. The air is heavy with the scent of damp earth and flowering trees. Tonight, Chan wants you to witness the ceremonial aspect of cacao, how the Maya drank chocolate not just for taste, but as a sacred ritual connecting humans with gods. You follow him to a circular clearing where a small altar has been set up. The surface is layered with maize husks, small figurines, and carved wooden vessels. Incense coils rise slowly into the air, carrying a subtle smoky sweetness that mixes with the natural aroma of cacao. You feel a shiver of anticipation. This is different from grinding or flavoring. This is ceremonial, intentional, sacred. John hands you a cup filled with thick, dark chocolate, frothy at the top. The texture is dense but smooth, with a slightly spicy scent from the chili and a faint sweetness from the honey. You notice how careful he is, lifting the cup with both hands as if it contains more than just drink. Historically, chocolate in Maya culture was deeply tied to religious and political events. Priests, nobles, and rulers consumed cacao during ceremonies, offerings, and even marriages. Drinking chocolate was an act of devotion, and the way it was prepared, the foam, the spices, the temperature, all had symbolic significance. You take a sip, and the bitterness hits first, then the warmth spreads through your chest. You imagine the ancestors who did the same, hands folded over the same rich beverage, murmuring prayers. There's something humbling about realizing that a simple drink could carry such profound meaning. A curious fact, in some ceremonies, cacao was mixed with flowers or even tiny amounts of maize wine, creating a ritualized, almost intoxicating brew. The combination was designed to heighten the senses, making the drinker feel closer to the divine. You notice that the foam on your chocolate seems to shimmer in the firelight, a tiny miracle of texture, craft, and care. Chan points to a carved figure at the altar, explaining it represents Cacao, the god of cacao and trade. Offering chocolate to the god was more than symbolic. It was an act of reciprocal respect. You can see how every step, from harvesting beans to grinding, mixing, and finally drinking, forms a full circle of devotion. You try to mimic the careful sipping, mindful of each movement. Even your posture changes. Shoulders relax, hands steady, eyes lowered. The ritual transforms not just the drink, but the drinker. You're aware of your breathing, the smell of the jungle, the taste of cacao, and the sense of being part of a story much larger than yourself. Scholars still debate whether these rituals were strictly spiritual or also served social control, a way for elites to maintain power through shared ceremonial practices. The evidence is fascinating but incomplete, leaving room for interpretation and wonder. As the night deepens, fireflies flicker across the clearing, and the warm chocolate lingers on your tongue. You notice the subtle details, how the shadows of the altar stretch across the ground, the delicate smoke curls from the incense, and how the froth dances in your cup with each sip. It's a sensory symphony, a quiet performance that demands attention and patience. John hands you a second cup, and this time you notice the sweetness of honey mingling perfectly with the underlying bitterness. He smiles and whispers. In each cup, the earth speaks. You can almost hear it. The rustle of leaves, the hum of insects, the heartbeat of the jungle itself. You finish slowly, savoring the last drop. Sitting there, surrounded by the soft sounds of the night, you realize that cacao isn't just food or currency. It's a bridge between worlds, between humans and gods, past and present. Drinking it ceremonially makes you part of a lineage, a living thread in an intricate tapestry. As the stars emerge and the jungle grows still, John stands, gently bowing toward the altar. You follow his lead, offering a silent thanks for the lessons, the flavors, and the stories shared. And in that moment, sipping the last remnants of the sacred drink, you feel both grounded and lifted, carried forward by centuries of ritual and care. Night deepens over the village, and a gentle hum of nocturnal life fills the air. Crickets chirp rhythmically, frogs croak from hidden pools, and the occasional owl calls from the canopy. Chan gestures for you to follow him to a small open-air space where the cacao fermentation process is about to be demonstrated tonight. You'll see how raw beans become something truly transformative. You step cautiously onto the soft, damp earth. Large leaves are laid out in overlapping layers, forming makeshift mats. On them lie heaps of freshly harvested cacao beans, pale and slightly pulpy. The scent is tangy, almost sour, nothing like the chocolate you know. Chan kneels, scooping a handful and pressing it gently between his fingers. Fermentation is where flavor begins. He explains the beans must sit for days, sometimes up to a week, to develop their characteristic taste. Historically, Maya farmers allowed cacao beans to ferment naturally in wooden boxes or covered pits, monitoring humidity and temperature carefully. Fermentation was as much a science as it was intuition. They knew when the beans had reached the perfect stage by smell, color, and texture. You lean closer, inhaling the pungent aroma. It's almost like smelling earth and fruit mixed together, a hint of sweetness buried beneath the tang. Here's an unusual fact. Some Maya villages even added banana leaves or corn husks during fermentation to subtly influence the flavor. The leaves weren't just containers. They contributed enzymes and aromas that enhanced the bean's complexity. You touch a leaf and notice its rough texture, imagining how it slowly interacts with the beans beneath. Chan hands you a small wooden stick to stir the beans gently. The pulp releases its juice, sticky and fragrant, coating your fingers. You realize that fermentation isn't passive. It's active care, requiring attention and respect for the living beans. Every stir encourages even development. and any neglect could ruin the batch. Scholars still debate the exact techniques Maya used for fermentation. Some argue it was purely empirical, refined through trial and error. Others suggest ritual and symbolism were involved, connecting humans, beings, and the spiritual world. Either way, the complexity of the process is undeniable. As you continue to stir, the pulp's color deepens, turning a rich, reddish-brown. You notice the subtle heat radiating from the heap, a result of microbial activity breaking down sugars. It's strange and slightly magical. Seeing raw, sour beans begin a quiet transformation into something that will one day taste divine. A few villagers join in, murmuring to one another as they check the consistency and moisture. You learn that the interaction of different bean varieties can affect the outcome, a secret known only to experienced fermenters. Each batch is unique, a fingerprint of soil, climate, and hands that tended it. John points to another heap, slightly more mature. These are ready to dry tomorrow, he says. The aroma now tells us the magic is beginning. You lean closer and inhale deeply. There's a subtle sweetness beneath the tang, a promise of chocolate yet to come. As the night continues, the jungle grows quieter, and the stars reflect faintly in a distant river. You sit back, palms sticky with pulp, and consider how this simple act, letting beans rest and breathe, connects you to generations of Maya farmers. Every choice, every stir, every moment of patience shapes the chocolate that centuries later will thrill palates worldwide. By the time you rise to leave, the beans have already begun their silent work, bubbling with unseen life, quietly becoming the foundation of something sacred, delicious, and eternal. Dawn arrives slowly, a soft pink haze spilling over the jungle canopy. You wake to the sound of birds calling and the subtle rustle of leaves, carrying the scent of damp earth and flowering cacao trees. Today, Sean has promised you the next step, drying the fermented beans, a process that seems simple, but is crucial for preserving flavor and preventing spoilage. You follow him to a raised platform made of woven reeds and bamboo. The fermented beans are spread in thin layers, glistening with residual pulp. Sunlight filters through the canopy, dappled and golden, warming the beans just enough to begin the slow drying process. Shauna explains that timing is everything. Too long in direct sun, and the beans can crack or lose aroma. Too short, and fermentation flavors remain underdeveloped. Historically, Maya farmers used careful observation to know when beans were perfectly dry. They often turned them several times a day, monitoring texture, aroma, and even sound. Yes, sound. Dry beans have a subtle, hollow knock when pressed together. You tap a few gently and hear the quiet rhythm, surprisingly satisfying. Here's a small but fascinating detail. Some villages used a mix of sun and controlled shade, layering banana leaves to adjust heat and airflow. This method subtly altered flavor profiles, producing chocolate with nuanced notes of earth, spice, and fruit. You lift a leaf and notice the shadowed beans beneath, their color deepening from light reddish-brown to a richer, almost chocolate tone. Sean hands you a small brush, asking you to gently stir the beans. The motion is repetitive, meditative, and slightly hypnotic. You realize the process is as much about patience and mindfulness as it is about food preservation. Each turn allows air to circulate, ensuring even drying and keeping the delicate flavors intact. A little-known fact: the Maya believed the drying process could carry spiritual significance. Beans exposed to the sun were thought to be blessed by the warmth of the sky god, integrating natural energy into the chocolate. Scholars debate whether this belief was symbolic or practical, but it adds a layer of meaning to what seems like a simple chore. You notice other villagers moving rhythmically alongside you, brushing, turning, and inspecting the beans. Their coordinated movements give the scene a quiet choreography, a daily ritual that's both practical and beautiful. You find yourself absorbed, almost forgetting the world outside this shaded clearing. As the hours pass, the beans begin to crack slightly, their aroma changing from sour and tangy to deep, earthy, and fragrant. It's a subtle transformation, yet profound. You breathe it in, realizing that the journey from raw bean to chocolate begins long before tasting. In moments like this where patience meets nature, Chan pauses beside you, his gaze sweeping over the beans. Drying is quiet magic, he says. You don't see it change every moment. but the final taste carries every second of care. You nod, feeling the truth in his words. The beans, silent and still, are alive with history, science, and craft. As the sun climbs higher, golden light reflecting off the drying beans, you sense the slow rhythm of the cacao cycle. Every step, harvesting, fermenting, drying, builds towards something more than nourishment. You touch a bean gently, feeling its warmth and weight, imagining the stories it will carry for centuries. By mid-morning, the beans are nearly ready for the next stage, roasting. But for now, you sit quietly, savoring the aroma, the soft heat of the sun, and the feeling of being part of a living tradition that honors patience, skill, and the magical gift of cacao. By late morning, the sun is higher, casting strong, warm light across the drying platform. Chan beckons you closer to a simple clay stove where a small fire has been prepared. Today, you'll experience roasting the cacao beans, the moment where raw fermentation transforms into rich chocolate aroma. The scent in the air is already enticing, a smoky, nutty promise of what's to come. You pick up a handful of beans warm from the sun and place them carefully in a shallow clay pan. The surface of the pan is darkened from repeated use, seasoned over generations. Chan demonstrates the gentle stirring motion, keeping the beans moving to prevent burning. The sound is subtle, a soft, rhythmic crackle, punctuated by occasional tiny pops as the beans release moisture. Historically, roasting was done over low, controlled fires, sometimes using specific types of wood to impart subtle flavor. Some would add a sweet aroma, others earthy notes, creating a complex flavor profile that the Maya refined over centuries. You inhale the rising steam and smoke, and the smell is almost hypnotic. Warm, deep, and comforting, yet intensely alive. A curious tidbit. The Maya sometimes roasted beans inside clay vessels lined with maize husks. The husks prevented burning and added a faint, toasty scent. You watch as John demonstrates, shaking the pan gently, the husks crackling under the heat. The process is almost ceremonial, each movement purposeful and deliberate. As you stir, you notice the beans darkening from reddish-brown to deep, rich brown, almost black at the edges. The aroma shifts too, from tangy fermentation to a deep, roasted chocolate scent that makes your mouth water. You realize that roasting is both art and science. Too hot, and the beans are bitter. Too cool, and they won't fully develop. Interestingly, historians still debate whether Maya roasting methods were purely culinary or if they carried ritual significance. Some argue that the fire's timing and duration symbolized solar cycles or spiritual purification. Others think it was purely practical. Either way, the ritualistic care is evident. Chan lets you taste a lightly roasted bean, warm and fragrant. Chewing slowly, you notice its bitterness tempered by nutty undertones and a faint sweetness from residual pulp. It's almost shocking how different it is from the raw beans, a subtle transformation that feels like alchemy in your hands. You continue roasting and turning, mesmerized by the gentle aroma filling the air. The villagers around you work quietly, each at their own pan, each stirring with care. The scene feels both communal and intimate, a shared labor that produces the foundation for the next stage of chocolate making. Another small detail. In some ceremonial batches, beans were roasted with small pieces of tree bark or flowers to add subtle aroma notes. Scholars argue about whether these additions were practical or symbolic, but the results were undoubtedly unique flavors that connected people to their environment and beliefs. As the session winds down, the beans are evenly roasted, warm, fragrant, and ready to be ground. You run your fingers over a few, noticing the smoothness and weight. Every stage of preparation, from harvest to fermentation to drying to roasting, builds layers of taste, aroma, and history. Chan steps back, smiling. Roasting awakens the beans. He says, "You'll see how they change again when we grind them." You nod, feeling a sense of anticipation for the next step. As the rich scent of roasted cacao lingers in the sun-warm clearing, the afternoon sun is gentle now, not harsh, as Chan leads you to a low wooden table. Today, you will witness the most hands-on part of chocolate making, grinding roasted cacao beans into paste. The beans are warm from roasting, their aroma filling the air with rich, earthy sweetness that seems almost tangible. You kneel beside a small stone grinding slab, called a metate, and pick up a rounded stone tool, the mano. Chan demonstrates the rhythm, Roll, press, twist, repeat. The beans crack, then crumble into a gritty paste, dark and glossy under the sunlight. You notice how repetitive movements produce a meditative cadence, the kind that makes time feel slower, almost suspended. Historically, Maya people used the metate for both maize and cacao. The technique allowed control over texture and consistency, producing a smooth paste for drinking or ceremonial use. You press your fingers against the paste. It feels slightly oily, sticky, and surprisingly warm from friction. It's a tactile, sensory experience connecting you directly to ancient hands. Here's a quirky detail. Some Maya added tiny amounts of chili, honey, or flower petals directly into the grinding paste, not just later in the drink. You sprinkle a bit of chili dust Chan offers, and the aroma changes instantly. Earthy, warm, and a little spicy. You realize how nuanced the flavor could be. Even before liquid is added, Chan instructs you to scrape the paste together, forming small, dense mounds. You notice how color shifts under your hands, from deep brown to a slightly glossy sheen. It's almost magical. Raw beans transformed into a rich, moldable substance that carries aroma, warmth, and history. Scholars still debate exactly how fine the Maya ground their beans. Some argue for a coarse texture, emphasizing bitterness. Others suggest they achieved a surprisingly smooth paste, almost like modern chocolate. Either way, the skill involved is impressive, demanding both strength and patience. You pause, tasting a tiny bit of the paste. The flavor is intense, bitter, earthy, slightly smoky from roasting, with a hint of sweetness from the pulp. You notice the subtle nuances that roasting and grinding created, flavors that could never exist in raw beans alone. Each chew is a lesson in transformation, patience, and craft. A small fact: grinding cacao could take hours for a single batch, and it was usually done by women or young apprentices under supervision. The repetitive work was laborious but essential, forming the base of chocolate culture. You feel a strange kinship with these hands across centuries, learning and transforming the same beans as they did. As the sun begins to tilt westward, shadows stretching long across the clearing, you finish your first batch. Chan nods approvingly, and you feel satisfaction. The transformation is tangible in your hands, in the aroma, and in the warmth of the paste. You take a moment to breathe in the rich scent of roasted, ground cacao. You're aware that each mound of paste represents not just food, but history, ritual, and care. With the grinding done, the next step, preparing the ceremonial chocolate drink, awaits. You can't wait to see how the final flavors come alive. The sun has dipped lower, bathing the clearing in soft amber light. You sit cross-legged beside Chan, your hands still warm from grinding cacao paste. Today, you'll learn how the Maya mix the paste into a ceremonial chocolate drink, a process that transforms dense cocoa into a frothy, aromatic beverage. Chan scoops some paste into a small wooden bowl and adds water, gradually stirring with a thin wooden rod. You notice how the paste resists at first, clumping stubbornly, until repeated stirring and gentle pressing slowly dissolve it. Tiny air bubbles rise, forming a delicate froth on the surface. The froth is important, Chan says. It's part of the ritual, part of the experience. Historically, the Maya prized this froth, considering it the essence of cacao spirit. They used specialized whisks called molinillos to create it, or in some cases rolled sticks. The foam added texture, symbolism, and even prestige. Thick froth indicated skillful preparation and respect for the drink. Here's a fun detail. Sometimes chili, maize flour, or honey was added to the drink during mixing, creating complex flavor layers. You stir in a pinch of chili and a drop of honey. The aroma shifts immediately, spicy, sweet, and warm, with a subtle bitterness underneath. You lift the bowl and inhale, savoring the heady scent. You take your first sip carefully. The flavor is intense and comforting. The smokiness of roasted beans, the slight bitterness, the warmth from chili, and the lingering sweetness. It's hard to believe that something so simple, water, beans, and small spices, could produce such complexity. You notice how every stage of preparation, from harvesting to roasting to grinding, culminates in this single, transformative moment. Scholars still debate whether ceremonial chocolate was mostly consumed by elites or enjoyed more widely among commoners during festivals. Evidence suggests both possibilities, leaving room for interpretation about social structures and ritual significance. You can't help but imagine the excitement, anticipation, and reverence each sip carried for the Maya. John hands you a small cup, and you practice the art of sipping, letting the froth linger on your lips. You realize the act is deliberate, almost meditative. Each mouthful demands attention, grounding you in the present while connecting you to centuries of tradition. The clearing around you feels alive, fireflies twinkling, leaves rustling, and the aroma of cacao filling the air like a comforting blanket. Another intriguing fact: some ceremonial drinks were served during negotiations, religious ceremonies, or important rites of passage. Chocolate was more than a beverage. It was an instrument of diplomacy, devotion, and celebration. You feel the gravity behind the seemingly casual act of drinking, appreciating the layers of history within each sip. As evening deepens, you savor every taste, aware that the beans you touch, roasted and ground, have traveled through hands and hearts across centuries. The ritual of preparation, the careful stirring, the froth, and the aroma all converge into a profound sensory experience, one that transcends simple sustenance. By the time you set down your cup, the jungle hums quietly around you. You've tasted history in its most literal form, feeling both grounded and lifted, connected to the Maya through the richness of cacao and the artistry of their craft. Night fully settles over the jungle, stars twinkling faintly through the canopy as you sit quietly beside Chan. The ceremonial chocolate drink has warmed your hands and spirit, and now he introduces the final step: storing and sharing the cacao, preserving both flavor and tradition for days to come. You watch carefully, feeling part of a living lineage. Chan shows you small clay jars, their interiors smoothed and darkened by repeated use. He gently scoops some of the leftover paste into them, sealing each jar with a layer of plant leaves. This keeps the cacao safe, he explains, and allows flavors to mature slowly. You lift a jar to your nose, inhaling the subtle earthiness that has deepened after roasting and grinding, a fragrance that feels ancient and comforting. Historically, Maya families stored cacao for both daily consumption and ceremonial use. Proper storage ensured that the paste retained its aroma and potency, which was particularly important for trade or gifting. Some jars were even buried slightly underground to maintain coolness and humidity. You imagine these carefully sealed vessels being transported or exchanged across villages, each carrying stories and taste across distances. Here's an interesting tidbit. In some regions, cacao jars were decorated with carved symbols or painted patterns, possibly denoting ownership, type, or ceremonial significance. Scholars are still debating whether these markings were primarily practical or symbolic, but the artistry speaks volumes about the cultural reverence for cacao. You run your fingers over a faint carved motif, appreciating the quiet care and its craftsmanship. Chan then encourages you to share some of the prepared drink with a small group of villagers gathered nearby. You pour carefully, watching the froth settle perfectly atop each cup. The communal act is warm, intimate, and full of subtle humor. Someone spills a tiny drop and everyone laughs softly. You realize that cacao is as much about connection as it is about flavor, uniting people through ritual, taste, and shared labor. Another little-known fact: cacao was sometimes gifted during important social exchanges, weddings, or negotiations, valued almost like currency. Its role extended beyond nutrition to become a social and spiritual connector, a tangible expression of trust and respect. You sip again, tasting history, diplomacy, and ritual all at once. As the evening air cools, Chan recounts stories of how different cacao varieties from the forest produced slightly different flavors. Even subtle differences in sun exposure, soil, or fermentation technique created noticeable variations. You marvel at how much knowledge and observation were required to master this craft, a sophisticated culinary science hidden within what now feels like a simple beverage. Scholars still debate whether some flavoring techniques were purely experimental or had ritualistic significance. Some argue that chili flowers or maize additions were symbolic offerings to the gods, while others see them as culinary innovation. Either way, the layers of meaning behind every cup are undeniable. Finally, as fireflies flicker around the clearing, you help John carefully seal the remaining jars and set them aside. The jungle hums softly, the aroma of chocolate lingering like a gentle memory. You lean back, savoring the moment, feeling the culmination of labor, care, and centuries of tradition within your senses. The journey from tree to cup, from bean to ritual, has carried you through history, taste, and human connection in ways you'll never forget. The night grows quieter, and the jungle hums softly around you. You lie back on the soft forest floor, the warmth of the day lingering in your muscles, and the rich scent of cacao still hanging gently in the air. Every movement, every sound, every aroma you experienced today, harvesting, fermenting, drying, roasting, grinding, and finally sipping, seems to echo in slow motion inside your mind. Your body feels heavy and relaxed, like the rhythm of the forest itself has seeped into you. The stars above twinkle faintly, distant but steady, and you imagine the Maya ancestors looking up at the same constellations, perhaps sharing in your quiet awe. Each sip of chocolate you took carries not just flavor, but centuries of care, observation, and ritual, a bridge connecting you across time. As you breathe slowly, your thoughts drift to the soft froth, the tiny air bubbles you watch form, the intricate patterns on the clay jars, and the steady hand of John guiding each step. The experience feels almost dreamlike now, a gentle current carrying you away from the waking world into a realm of memory and imagination. Your senses are wrapped in warmth and calm, the faint sounds of leaves rustling, the distant call of a bird, and the lingering scent of cacao blend together like a lullaby. You feel the history settle in you, a comforting weight, like a soft blanket tucked around your shoulders, reminding you that some things, like patience, care, and connection, are timeless. Now your eyelids feel heavy, your breathing slow and steady. The last traces of cacao aroma mix with the cool night air, guiding you gently towards sleep. You are already floating, drifting into dreams where the forest, the cacao, and the voices of the past mingle freely. Everything is soft, warm, and perfectly still, a world where the days, lessons, and joys dissolve into peaceful rest.